Welcome into another live edition of Betting Weekly Fast Break. Thanks for spending your Friday with us as we transition from a full day of Ryder Cup action to the return of the WNBA semifinals tonight. I'm Sara Civian, and I'm joined by professional handicapper Wes Reynolds. Wes, can you start us off here with a vibe check on the Ryder Cup? What are your takeaways as day one gets us closer to wrapping up?
The vibes are not great at the moment for Team USA. They lose the foursome session like they usually do, seemingly in the Ryder Cup. It was almost same song, different verse. They didn't get swept at least. So down 3-1 into the 4-ball best ball format in the afternoon. Right now, still on the front nine, still a lot of golf to be played, but 2-2. The Americans, I think, would just like to win the session barely, maybe 2.5 to 1.5 to kind of close that gap here a little bit. But Team USA riding uphill yet again in the Ryder Cup.
You think there's any hope for Team USA? I know Bradley's going to shake up the matchups.
There's always hope, but you just hate having a deficit, yet again at the Ryder Cup, having to come from behind. But deficits are made to be overcome. The Europeans have certainly done it over the years, and maybe Team USA can do it again. But yeah, I got off to a slow start this morning. Some of the pairings and maybe some of the players that were playing really well coming into the Ryder Cup that really had good second halves of the season, like JJ Spawn and Ben Griffin sitting that first session, probably ended up being a tactical error from Keegan Bradley.
Yeah, well, we learn as we go, and we will see what happens with that. But I just love these marathon sports days, anyways. And the WNBA semifinals are back in action tonight. Both series are all tied up heading into their respective game threes. And there have already been some wild moments all around West. Before we get into the specific matchups, I just wanted to get your general read on round two so far. You can answer this from a betting or a basketball perspective, but what's standing out to you through the first half of these semifinals?
Yeah, just from a basketball perspective, I think we've had essentially two blowouts in the Aces Fever series. Fever with game one, and then the Aces respond in game two. And probably the Aces were a little bit gassed, I think, from that competitive Seattle series that was a lot more competitive than people thought it was going to be. And you kind of saw it. You got to saw like Aja Wilson had a poor game and seemed to run out of Wonder Woman seemed to run out of fumes a little bit. So and then the Aces rebound second game because Kelsey Mitchell had that super good game the first time, and then didn't shoot the ball well in game two, and the Fever got behind, couldn't stop anything at the rim. So we've seen two, I don't want to say non-competitive games, but the scores didn't end up being competitive. Meanwhile, Lynx and Mercury, Merc were up against it, almost down 20 in game number two, and it looked like the Lynx were going to get away and go up 2-0, and then Phoenix came back, really courtesy of the three ball. That's what really brought them back, I think, in the second half. They just started to make threes and started to get open threes. Whitcomb and Copper and Sabali, and I think they hit 13 threes against 7 for Minnesota, and you win a game by 6 and you win threes by 18, more often than not, you're going to win that game. So we felt maybe going in that was going to be the more competitive series, but we also felt that, the Fever weren't going to be easy necessarily for the Aces. I thought that series price was too high. It's proved to be because the Fever haven't been swept and they at least got a game. And we'll see if they can retake the lead tonight.
Yeah, you were so right. I mean, even the last time we spoke, mulling over kind of what we were going to do opening game one, and you were pretty bullish on at least the Fever covering the spread, but you were thinking about maybe series bets or game one. I don't know. You're just kind of thinking this is kind of priced maybe wrong, and I was with you on that. So I ended up taking the spread, and obviously they covered it. Did you decide to go with any of that for game one or game two?
I did first half in game number one, and it got there. Game two ended up being a split on a total where I went with the over, and then as it got to be a blowout, then I kind of had to buy out a little bit. Was trying to middle, didn't work out, but thought that we would get a higher scoring game in game number two just because I thought the Aces offense would be better. And the Fever, I think, despite the fact that they're shorthanded, I think they feel better in a little bit of an up-tempo game. So I felt that they were trying to push the tempo against the Aces, where the Aces really can't, set up the size advantage. And the Aces allowed a lot at the rim. So the Fever were able to get a lot in transition in game number one. not so much in game number 2.
Yeah, that kind of came to a head, and we'll get into that. But definitely the high tempo you bring up. I mean, Kelsey Mitchell's the fastest player in the league, if you ask me. And if you ask many WNBA players, there was a video going around TikTok the other day where they all said that. So it's great to see her have her moment too. And we'll get into that. But why don't we have a little look see at the current championship winner odds over at Bet Rivers? The Lynx are still clear favorites at minus 155. The Aces are second at plus 200. Mercury are third, plus 700. And the Fever remain the long shot at plus 2,500. Do you have any strong feelings in the championship field right now?
Yeah, I'm not at the current prices, but the Lynx have been who I've been riding with all
Mm,
season. And even before the start of the season, they were who I said were going to win the title. I'm not changing now. It doesn't mean it's an absolute lock, even though it's priced as odds on. But I just think that they're the deepest team. And I think depth matters, and you have continuity. You have the same starting lineup from last year, where they did lose in the deciding game in the WNBA finals against the New York Liberty. So they were kind of the mission team, right? They were coming back. It's like, okay, we should have been champions. We should have had the trophy. And now we got another crack at it here. So I still think the Lynx very much the rightful favorites here going forward. And obviously Fever being priced as the long shot because they were the 6th seed. The other 3 teams I think were kind of expected to be here. But the
mm.
Fever were not, so they're obviously the longest shot. And knowing that they have 6 players out for the season injured, and they're playing a lot of hardship players, the Odyssey Simses and the Aerial Powers and Shea Petty, they're having to play a lot of these players, but they've stepped up in certain moments, and they've had to go deeper into their bench and play some of the reserves that weren't getting a lot of clock, and they've gotten them here at least to the semifinals. So I think the Fever, no matter what, could probably call this tumultuous season, to say the least, from an injury standpoint, a success.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome to watch, honestly, especially you mentioned Odyssey Sims and then you mentioned kind of success around the rim. It feels like she's cleaning up there. And obviously, game two is different than game one in that respect. But it's cool to see these players that are kind of journey women. You know what I mean? Kind of, they weren't on the team to start the season and they can kind of, it goes to show maybe in a league like this where there are so few teams that there are people on the outer rims that could maybe make a team, maybe not, that could actually have a serious impact on a roster.
Yeah, no question about it. And I think with the Fever, it's kind of brought them a little bit of a togetherness because they've
Mm,
had, what didn't work out with Dewana Bonner, and Stephanie White had some, family health issues, and all these players getting injured and all these new players coming in. And there's been kind of a togetherness with this team where it's
mm,
like, we're up against it. We're the underdog, and they're playing like it. They're playing like they have nothing to
mm,
lose. I think because they really don't, because they weren't expected to be here. I mean, you take just Caitlin Clark by herself, it's like, okay, this team is awful without her, and that has proven not to be the case. That because other players do step up in these situations, and I think to go 24-20 and to get to the WNBA semifinals was a hell of a job done by this team, and Stephanie White and her staff have kept these ladies together and kept them fighting. And we're going to see if the Fever have just a little bit more fight in them. They've had fight in them all season. Against adversity, they've responded the majority of the time, and going to have to do it at least 2 more times if they want to advance to the finals.
yeah, I think it's been kind of cool to see Caitlin Clark on the bench too. Like she's picking up the $200 fines for supporting her teammates, whatever on Twitter. I don't know if you caught that, but also just kind of it's cool to see her support the team. I don't know how to exactly to put that, but she can take kind of the spotlight off of herself and is in it for the team, if that makes sense.
No, it does. It absolutely
Yeah,
makes sense because I think that they're all there. And we saw Sid Colson when Kelsey Mitchell
yeah,
got taken
that's
out of the
right.
game with the blowout in game number 2. Kind of talking to her and telling her some things. And there's a togetherness with this team that I
Mhm,
think maybe has been underestimated by the market. Certainly has been
mhm,
underestimated by the market. The fact that you know they're like all in it together, and they you see 6 players on the bench injured, and all sitting together where they almost don't even have room on the bench for them because there's so many. And that has brought them together, that you have no other choice. You either mentally and physically pack it in, or you fight, and they've chosen to fight, and that's why they're still here.
Yeah, 100%. So speaking of the market, let's check out the market on tonight's game. Bet Rivers has the Aces as the favorite at minus 175. The points line is currently 162.5, and there's a 4-point spread. What's your read on this one?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with the Fever here, actually, at +4. And it's not necessarily zigzag theory, which so far has worked in both of these games, in both of these semifinal series. But I am going to go with the Fever here at +4. I think that they respond being back at home. They should have a very good crowd. The crowds have continued to come out,
Mhm.
by the way, for the Fever, despite the fact that Caitlin Clark is not playing, because everybody's like, well, the attendance isn't going to drop. Well, all of a sudden, just because they love 22, they fall in love with the rest of the team too and start
Mhm.
supporting them. So, the Fever have had great sales and great attendance all year round. I think they're going to have a very big crowd tonight. So I like the Fever +4 here. I think that they respond. I just think there was the shooting regression in game number 2 that they certainly didn't have in game number 1. Vegas got whatever they wanted at the rim. So the defense certainly has to be better. The question is, Lexi Hull, in terms of her health, she had a back brace and she was questionable if she wasn't going to go. Now
Mhm.
she's probable. So she is going for sure tonight. And the Aces just, I think, jumped out on them 26-17 after the first quarter. And Aja Wilson, from a down game, obviously responded in a big time way. One other thing I think that's going to be at play here, like the foul shooting edge wasn't really huge for Vegas, 15 to 21 against 11 to 15, but the Fever were not happy about the officiating. They felt like they were allowing the Aces to be more physical, and the Aces kind of said the same thing after game number 1. So officials have ears too, and they hear and see things as well. So maybe you see the Fever get a little bit more of a friendly whistle, because they were not playing that aggressive a defense, I think, in game number 2, because I think they maybe had the fear factor that the officials were going to call so many fouls on them, and the fact that they lack depth as it is with all these injured players out. But I think they bounce back tonight.
Mhm.
And Lexi Hall, if she can hit those threes, her threes actually kept the Fever in the game for a while, at least for a
Mhm.
half in game number 2. But you gotta win the 3 ball battle against the Las Vegas Aces. I think, with the lack of depth, if you want to win here, and I think that they will. I took +4 tonight.
Cool. You mentioned Lexi Hall. Yeah, I like +4 too. I'm not sure if I'm going to do a bet on the game itself. We'll see when we get to the end here. But you mentioned Lexi Hall. I was seriously eyeing over 7.5 points for her. I think she obviously broke out recently, and that has been so needed. And if the team is going to have success and beat the Aces, she's going to have to play a role, especially with the threes, right? So to see her kind of get in her groove somewhat in the previous games, that's a good sign for them because she had been struggling in the beginning of the playoffs. So it
Right,
feels like
right.
she's kind of getting into a groove.
Yeah, and they're gonna need somebody. It can't just be all
Mhm.
Kelsey
Yeah,
Mitchell here. So
right.
Odyssey Sims, I think, has been a
Mhm.
pretty consistent scorer, but
Yeah.
AB and some others are really gonna have to produce here. On the Aces side, for me, for a prop that I will look at, and I will look, and let me get the exact price here, minus 129 at Bet Rivers, over 15.5 for Jackie Young. And
Okay. Yeah.
Angel Wilson is always going to be priced in those mid 20s. 25 points. She had
Mhm.
25, by the way, last time out. Jackie Young, a little bit down shooting, 13 points on 5 of 11. She did play a couple less minutes because this was a blowout, so they were able to sub out the starters fairly early in the fourth quarter. I think Jackie Young, she tends to respond like when she has a little bit of a down game. Not that it was a bad game. In game
Mhm.
number 2. She had 5 rebounds, 5 assists, and also 13 points, but down from a scoring standpoint. And the fact that you have Aja Wilson, who's taking a ton of shots, a lot of shot volume for Aja, and then also last time out, Nalissa Smith. Outlier performance for Nalissa Smith. She had 18 points, by the way, on 7 to 9 shooting. Nalissa Smith, like, her point totals are usually like 7.5 or 8.5 or something like that. So, you know, that being the fact that you had a player that had it going a little bit, sometimes somebody can be a little bit deferential, and maybe that was Jackie Young there. I don't think so tonight in a in a game that's really gonna decide who has control of the series. Jackie Young over 15.5 points minus 129 is the prop that I like for this one.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, yeah, you're right about the rebounds that she has and kind of the need she has to score,
Mhm.
especially if I mean they figured out how to contain Wilson in game one. And
Right.
do you think that's credit to the Fever, or do you think that's an off game from Wilson?
It's a little bit of both. I think
Okay.
Aaliyah Boston actually did do a good job on her defensively, and then the fact that you know coming back from that Thursday night game, even though the Fever played earlier in that
Mhm.
doubleheader as well, so they didn't show any signs of fatigue. But I think the Aces did because Asia has to carry so much of the load. Now with the Fever, I don't want to say it's by committee because Kelsey Mitchell carries a lot of the scoring load, but the Asia has to also carry a little bit of the rebounding as well. And meanwhile, the Fever, I think, can do that by committee with Boston, with Flash Howard, with some of the reserves off the bench. So uh, it was probably a little bit of both there. And also Jackie Young, former Indiana Miss Basketball, comes back to her home state. I think you always, want to do well in front of your family and friends from your home state. So another, I think, feather in the cap for the over with Jackie Young tonight.
Yeah, I really like that. These narratives do matter. And I was mulling over maybe the under 162.5, just because these teams are sussing each other out defensively, it seems. I know the containment of Wilson is probably like a good indicator of if it's going to be the under or the over. But at the same time, I don't know if I feel fully confident in doing that, knowing how crazy this
Hmm.
Fever fan base gets at home, right? I think it might be kind of just a wild game where the Fever do break out and maybe, yeah, I don't know. How do you feel about that one?
In terms of the total, yeah, I
Yeah.
was I was looking at it and seeing where I wanted to go here. I think it's
Mhm.
about right. I think at 162 and a
Yeah.
half, it is about right. Game number one, of course, played to 162. Game number two ended up being 158, but it was still close. Like when I was monitoring the live
Mhm.
total in that game, it was still around 160 and a half or 159 and a half. So it wasn't all that far off. So I didn't really see an advantage here either way. Now, usually in the NBA, when you have a tie series that's kind of in the middle, when it's 2-2, I like playing unders in game number five. I'm not sure I really want to do that in game number three here, even though that would
Mhm.
kind of match the logic of how we handled NBA playoff totals, that this could be an under. But I think at 162 and a half, pretty much right on line for me.
Yeah, that's a really good take, and I think that's probably where subconsciously my head was at when it comes to how I deal with the NBA, where it's like, all right, the game 5 under, exactly. But I took the over in the Mercury Lynx game the other day, and then it only hit because they went to overtime, and it's just like, yep, that line was pretty accurate.
Hmm.
Like, they know what they're talking about.
Yeah, 100%. And it's hard when you have only a couple games. They're not always priced accurately, but more often than not, and it's the same people that are betting them too as well. You might get some more casual money in the market in the playoffs, especially if they're weeknight games. Like a lot of
Mhm.
these games on Sunday, they do kind of get ignored, and it's mostly the hardcores that have been betting this stuff all season that are going to be still paying attention, because it seems like, okay, when football's on, everybody kind of loses it and it like
Mhm.
almost forgets about it. So uh that's probably what's happening here. So you know the numbers are what they are, and there's different situations. And you mentioned game number two going over and overtime. I felt kind of fortunate, being the fact that they were down 20 at one point, having the Mercury at plus 7.5, and they just start hitting threes in the second half. And you could see it with Minnesota, this lead gradually declining. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, can the Mercury get down to 10? Can they cut the lead in half at the end of the third quarter? Then it's like, okay, you have a fighting chance. And then all of a sudden, they just started making them. And then it was a three possession game. Then it was a two possession game. Then it was a one possession. Then they took the lead. And, the Lynx, surprisingly kind of panicked a little bit.
Mhm.
I think with the lead, and maybe there was some fatigue because the Lynx, I think their starters got a bulk of the minutes. We talked about the depth with this team, even though it's taken a hit with Dejanay Carrington now being out for the season. But Cheryl Reeve really rode the starters here, and I felt in the fourth quarter they were a little bit gassed against the Mercury. And Nafisa Collier certainly put up the numbers, but plus minus of minus 11 and 38 minutes. Didn't shoot the ball well from the outside, 2 of 8. Still think Minnesota is still the much deeper team, but Cheryl Reeve's going to have to, I think, rely on that bench a little bit more. That bench only played 37 minutes, and the Phoenix bench played 74 minutes, and that's why I think you saw their starters. Thomas and Sabali and Copper, they had a little bit more energy at the end of the game and into the overtime.
Yep, and we've got a comment here that says Carrington loss hurts Lynx more than some might expect. IMO. I completely agree. I mean, she's such a competitor. She's most improved player of the year a few years back. Like she's a like a fighter and kind of like a warrior type. That's who you sign to go off in the postseason. But again, they didn't have her the whole season, right? And I know she
Hmm.
was looking to make an impact in all of that. I think they should be able to still be dominant without her. But I think maybe it's kind of an exhale from them when they signed her, right? And it's like, okay, we got more reinforcements. We can kind of shift things around. And maybe they shifted things around a little bit to knowing that she has those steal, like she is the queen of the late game steal, right? So
Hmm.
not having that kind of takes away the X factor, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think is really good as like the sixth woman, if you will, off the bench. I think much
Mhm.
better than she is with where she's a starter because of the defense and because she can give you some scoring. You always need that scoring off the bench, which I think when Fee was out, Jessica Shepard certainly provided for the Minnesota Lynx. And I do think Cheryl Reeve does need to trust her bench a little bit more.
Mhm.
Trust Heidemann, trust Jessica Shepard, and those players. You're gonna narrow your rotation a little bit in playoff games, but you can only ride these starters so much because Alana Smith, sometimes she'll give you offense, but she's the co-defensive player of the year, right? So she's there to
Mhm.
rebound and there to play defense. So there are times where it's like 5-on-4 where you've only got four scorers out there for the Lynx. And
Mhm.
even Bridget Carlton can be a little bit inconsistent. Now she can get the threes going from time to time, but more often than not, you've got three dependable scorers for the Lynx when you look at the starters: Fee, Courtney Williams, and Kayla McBride. And Kayla McBride is mainly an outside shooter, doesn't get a ton necessarily on the drive in the paint. So that's why I think, you need some help off that bench. And uh, didn't really get it very much in game number 2 because you didn't see a lot of minutes from him at all.
Yeah, and you mentioned Heidemann. I took the under on her that day because I felt like she wasn't going to get a lot of minutes. Do you think that's going to change tonight?
I would think so because there
Mhm.
were times where they would have her in at the end of the game,
Mhm.
in late in the season, where maybe Courtney Williams would either be playing off the ball or Courtney would even be off the bench, and Courtney is their point guard by and large. But they've played Heidemann in very crucial minutes late in games, so I got to think that they have at least enough confidence in her.
Yeah, 100%. I think, like you said, the panic might have set in a little bit. And then I'll ask you this. Obviously, the Mercury came back from a 20-point deficit in game two to win in overtime. And it seems like that was the first time Minnesota kind of panicked at the end of a game. I feel like their MO is the ability to close out a game. Do you think the Mercury may have cracked the code in that way? Or do you think it's one game, get over it?
I think it was one game. I think the fact that there is a little bit of fatigue there, and I think we can't
Mhm.
underestimate how much like the three advantage was. And sometimes you'll
Yeah.
get games like that when you're looking, kind of doing the box score autopsy, if you will, after a game. 13 to 32 against 7 to 28, and a lot of those 13 came in the second half. For this team, Minnesota was much better at the rim and at the paint. Like the 2-point shooting was 57 to 43% for Minnesota. You would expect, okay, you've got that much of a discrepancy, you're going to hang on, but the threes can certainly make it up here. Now, Can Phoenix do that consistently game to game? That's where I have my
Mhm.
doubts personally, that they can just make those threes every single time, because there's times they really struggle with the
Mhm.
outside shot, because you have Alyssa Thomas that's going to play the bully ball. She's not really a 3-point shooter necessarily, and Mac also plays down low. Bonner can sometimes get it going, but really your most consistent 3-point shooter is Sammy Whitcomb off the
Mhm.
bench, because Sabali can go really up and down. Like, Sabali was a good overplay in game number 2 after such a terrible game number 1. But she's going to be kind of hit or miss from the outside. She's at her best when she's playing inside, outside, getting to the foul line, what have you. So, when I was looking at this game, it's like, okay, how do I want to play this? Because I think that the number, Sarah, at -4 is right. I
Yeah.
think, and with the zigzag, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe people came in on the links a little bit late. But I just I don't think that there's like a ton of real line value here, because these teams
Mhm.
know each other so well. So just looking around to say, how do I want to do this? If it anything at all. I think that this is going to be perhaps a lower scoring game, even though I think the total is right. So uh, what I'm looking at is, I think Phoenix is going to struggle a little bit from the three. I think Minnesota plays better defense tonight than they did in game number 2. And now, by the way, there's more rest too, because they've had 2 days in between here, and not just
Mm.
the every other day.
Yeah.
So they haven't played since Tuesday, and yeah, they're still for the road teams, but I would expect more well rested teams, which means I think you would expect better defense. So for this game, I'm going to go with the team total under 77.5 for the Phoenix Mercury. I would obviously prefer maybe this goes to 78 later on. So, you know, don't maybe rush to bet this as of yet, because this could go to 78 at one point, which obviously you're going to like better. But I still think under 77.5 team total on the Phoenix Mercury is worth a play. This one, maybe more so than the first game, strikes me as a little bit of a grinder,
Mhm.
especially if this is close, that this is going to be value the basketball, slow the tempo a little bit, get the best shot you can, work against the shot clock. So Phoenix Mercury, to me, who are the underdogs, I think the points are going to be lower, under 77.5 team total.
I like that. I feel like that's an astute observation of where we're at in this series. And it's difficult to sometimes I mean, when it's the nature of these WNBA playoffs, it's kind of like the ebb and flow of there's a different amount of games every round. And then you kind of have to account for that. I like looking at it from that standpoint. And like at this point, I don't know, like you said, I'm thinking a lot about what you said about NBA game fives, like that you can't really think like that because this is a different format. So I kind of like where your head's at with that. I was eyeing 30 plus points, rebounds, and assists by AT at -235. Obviously, that's like not the best value in the world, but I feel like that's probably going to happen. I think she's such a well rounded player. She's been talking a little bit and she's been backing up the talk. So for a prop, I might consider that tonight and kind of just err on the safe side.
And she's gonna have to score, I think, a little bit more.
Mhm,
There are times where, when you're getting double digit rebounds and double digit assists, obviously somebody else is scoring, so
mhm,
you're not always needed. But you've seen her, I think, over the last 3 games, take a little bit more of the scoring load. Against the Liberty and in the deciding game of that series, she was 15 and a half her points prop, and she went over and scored 20. Game number
mhm,
1, 15 and a half, same thing, scored 18. Game number 2 of this series, scored 14 and a half, ended up with 19. And part of that, I forget what she had at the end of regulation. It was right at the number, I think. But she's been having to take a little bit more of the scoring load that she hasn't, maybe always felt the need. Because there'd be time where she'd get double digit rebounds and assists and maybe like just barely get 10 points
mhm,
several
mhm.
times during the season. But now I think she feels like she's got to take more of the scoring initiative. So if anything with an AT prop, I would lean over points. I think the number is right at the market now, though. So that's going to be a stay away for me.
Yeah, I was kind of just mulling it over. I feel like I might end up doing it last second, but that's not going to be my official play. So if you want to lock in your official plays right now, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, my three are going to be. We're going to go with the Fever +4. And
Mhm.
and and by the way, you may see because you don't get a ton of line movement in some of these WNBA games because the market is efficient. There's maybe some less betters in the market, especially with football and everything going on. So there's a possibility you might get a 4.5. I still think it's worth it at 4, which is where it is at Bet Rivers. I think it's worth it to go ahead and take the Fever as a home dog
Yeah.
tonight. I would expect a very good effort from this team, and being back at home and getting a good crowd on a Friday night, even with high school football going on in the state of Indiana. I think they'll get a lot of people in attendance downtown in Indy at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. So +4 for the Fever. Also, Jack.
Breaking news. Breaking news. It just changed to 3.5. Does that change your philosophy at
Well,
all?
well, we'll stick at 4.
Cool.
Yeah. So it went to 3.5 at Bet Rivers. I would want 4 or more. I will say that. So I don't want to necessarily take 3.5, but
Cool.
we'll go ahead and ballpark it +4 on the Aces, or excuse me, on the Fever, and over 15.5 points for Jackie Young on the Aces side, -129. Coming back home to the state of Indiana, and she's got to carry a little bit more of the load for
Mhm.
Asia Wilson. I don't think that you're going to get a ton out of the supporting cast for the Aces tonight, like you did in game number 2. Like, I don't
Mhm.
expect you're going to get that production out of Melissa Smith. I don't expect you're going to get that production necessarily out of Chelsea Gray or any of the others, Bell or Leonai, some of the younger players they've been playing off the bench. So Jackie Young is going to be the one that's going to have to score to keep them in the game aside from Aja. So Jackie Young over 15.5 points. And then for the late game tonight, the second game in the doubleheader, let's go Phoenix Mercury under 77.5 on the team total.
Cool. I like where your head's at with that. I am going to go in with the Jackie Young bet with you because that is very sound logic here. And I've been watching how they've been able to contain Wilson a little bit more. She's had to have go to different options, and Young maybe wasn't able to do that last game, but I think she's going to pick it up this game, and they have to be creative. And like you said, the bench in supporting cast might not be as sustainable as they have to be. So I feel Young is going to go off, and I feel like there's going to be a rebound game with that because, like you said, she's good at bouncing back. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to take the under in this game too, under 162.5. I feel as though we'll see if the logic check is out there, right? With like, all right, they're tied 1-1. It's going to be a close defensive game, and maybe I'll learn something, and maybe I won't. But that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have no bets on Lynx Mercury. This has been chaos, and I'm happy to get away with my overtime bets hitting. So there I am with that one.
Yeah. If you don't have anything, no need to like force something necessarily on that game.
Yes.
I do think probably in this game more so than the first game, we are getting a real grinder here. That
Yes.
the first game could potentially go under,
Mhm.
and I would lean that way. But I think this might be something where you're in the high 60s or the very low 70s with
Yeah.
Minnesota and Phoenix. So I think that this turns into a grind, especially if it's close. You're gonna see these teams start to like, okay, slow it down, try to work for the best shot possible, try to get to the foul line at the end of the shot clock. So I like the Lynx to win the game, even though,
Yeah.
and that's why I did team total instead of laying the 4 because I think that that's the right number for Minnesota.
And these are effectively the two best defensive teams in the league. So it all checks out there. And these have been fantastic games to watch because of that. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. But there are our official bets of the night. Wes, you got anything else for us?
That'll do it for the WNBA card. So we'll
Mhm.
see what these lines are going to be. Of course, Sunday, by the way, it's the unfortunate reality you have to go against the NFL. Sunday will be game number 4, and then, if necessary, in parentheses, like they always do on the broadcast, game number 5 Tuesday between these two teams. So yeah, I like more basketball, so I would like to see these things go the distance if possible, and then finals would be, I don't have a finals date. It would start like 2nd or 3rd of October, basically. Because look, they want to get this season finished though before the NBA in terms of the regular season starts, which isn't all that far away.
God, it's coming at you, and we'll be with you every step of the way in the NBA. And did you hear Sunday is against the NFL and also against the Jonas Brothers? Did you see that the Jonas Brothers had to move their concert to
I
Monday because
did. Well, that shows you maybe the growth of the W is the
yes,
fact that
exactly.
it's usually the W that had to move their
Mhm,
game, for a big time
mhm.
concert, but not this time around. It is a brave new world in the WNBA.
Yeah, love to see it. Maybe the Joe Bros will do the national anthem. I'd love to see that. The growth all around, good times, and that our official plays. And we will see you next time. Thanks so much for joining us. Like and subscribe if you like what you see and you want to make sure you never miss an episode. Signing off.